So in my situation, I really wasn't looking for any of that, but I guess leadership is placed on the individual that others think could be a leader. So somehow individuals asked me to be part of something that they were thinking was necessary, which was to form a group of individuals to protect each other from what was happening in school. And what was happening in school is if you were Spanish, if you went into the restroom, a person who was African American, because they were the biggest in number, the Spanish and the African Americans wanted to go in and basically beat somebody up, right? And so between 3 or 5 guys, they'll beat one guy up just to prove a point that they're stronger. And so the Spanish people didn't want necessarily to do anything wrong. They just wanted to send a message to the others that we weren't individuals anymore. We were also a group, and if they did that, then there would be retaliation. So I was 13 years old. By the age of 15, some people, unfortunately, already were bystanders. Some people had ended up in prison, dead, shot, had to carry weapons. Much of what you see on the...
And shot for not any reason at all.
You know, because somebody looked at him wrong, because somebody said something about him. A lot of nonsense, basically. Because someone had a different color than someone else in regards to their dress, signalizing that they were from a specific gang background and so on. So this was happening in Houston in general. If we go back to 91 and 92, a lot of the movies coming out led to that. Boys in the Hood, Menace to Society. These movies basically sent a message by which the youth would go out and implement this sort of lifestyle. So eventually, at the age of 16, my parents sent me away. An incident happened one night on a Friday night, and by Saturday, basically my parents shipped me out to Colombia. And they said, this is the place where you're going to go and get your life straight, because obviously here you're not going the right route. It's funny to say, and just for the listeners, at that point in time, I was an honor roll student. I had straight A's and B's in school, and no one could ever come and detect from the sense of school, as I see a lot of the Muslim parents, stress about the whole issue of grades, and they think if the kid is doing good with grades, then everything else is good. But that's not really the case, because I had very good grades, and in reality, I looked at school as being too easy, kind of a joke, and many people didn't pay attention. But I personally like knowledge, because from my background, my family, my father was an engineer, as I mentioned, and my mother is also educated. So eventually, my parents sent me back to Colombia. In Colombia, I learned a very nice lifestyle of living. It was a very natural way of life. The youth respected the parents, and the elders were looked at as valuable in society and someone who you would never speak bad against. And this was shown all throughout society. And I started going to school there, and they wanted to send me 2 grades back, because the educational school system there is far more advanced than here. And eventually I realized that things were serious over there. School was a serious business. Everyone was out to better themselves. Much of my family members were engineers. Some of them were architects. And I could see the way they were living. And there were people who had a very calm lifestyle. And there wasn't all of this aggression happening in the environment. And it's funny, because through the media we get messages about Colombia as being a very violent place.
That's right.
And here I left a place that was very violent to a very calm place. I could go and be in a river 10 minutes away from my house, in something like an oasis, something beautiful, and it was a very calm lifestyle. I taught English there as a second language, became a professor at the age of 16 to 18. And eventually when I came back, I had a shift of the reality of life. But when I came back to America, I didn't want to mix with many of the people who I knew from before, because I didn't want that lifestyle. And after living without that environment, in my environment, I saw that I flourished in regards to school, in regards to professional life. And I just wanted to come, get some college certificate, and just go back. And in the midst of that, I saw that my environment, my surroundings, was like a culture shock for me, because I liked the way that I was living in Colombia. And I need to point out that in Colombia, there was a siren that would go off at 12 o'clock in the middle of the day. And everyone would get out of school, and every business owner would shut down their businesses and go home, eat with their families, and take a nap.
Qaylula.
Qaylula. So this was done throughout the whole city. And at 2 o'clock, people would go back, open up their businesses and so on. And then at 6 o'clock, there was another siren. And then everyone would come home, eat with their families, and then they'd be with their families the rest of the day. So I couldn't understand the power of that. I mean, if someone would have explained to me, but I lived that way. So it brought me closer to my nature as a human being. And eventually, when I came back, I was looking for a way out of the reality that I was living here. And it couldn't be in just going and finding another environment within this environment. It had to do with something ideological. So I started looking in different philosophies and religions. I ended up going to a Buddhist temple to ask them what they thought about life, the Hindu temple. I was studying Kabbalah, ancient Jewish mysticism, from an individual who studied in Israel. I studied all kinds of things, and in the midst, a friend of mine from Egypt actually told me about Islam. And the way that I found out about Islam is not common. I had left the club from being with him, and I'd known him for years. We grew up together. And at about 3 o'clock in my car, he just looked at the liquor he was drinking, and he said, "I can't believe I'm still doing this." And to me, it was strange because that's the norm. That's what everybody did. And so I asked him, "What do you mean?" And he said, "I can't believe I'm still doing this after having gone to Mecca." And I said, "What is Mecca?" And he said, is where the house of God is. And I said, I looked in different religions and philosophies, but I never knew of one that said that God had a house. And so he said, no, this place was built by Abraham and Ismail. Right when he said that, I identified that they were prophets of God, and he told me, Islam is the true religion of God. That seriousness from him made me curious to look into Islam. And I asked him more, and he said, I'm not the proper person to answer these questions. You need to talk to my mother. She was a Christian nun in Italy, and she's now Muslim, and she knows the differences between Christianity and Islam. So I went to her soon after that, and she gave me my first Quran, and I started realizing that Islam it went in accordance to what I was looking for. The more that I studied, the clearer life became. And
how old were you at this time?
I was about 20 years old. I was about 20. I embraced Islam at the age of 21. So I researched for about a year, seriously sometimes, and sometimes I would just put it to the side because there's so many distractions going on in life and so on. And it was me searching, and my girlfriend as well, who was Colombian at that time. And eventually, after about a year of going to different mosques, sitting in classes, tafsir classes, to understand that the Quran had really been changed, going from place to place, asking different individuals, emailing people, has this book been changed? I would email the Jews if the Torah had been changed. I would email the Christians. I would email the Muslims. I was given everything a fair chance without coming to a conclusion. And eventually I found that Islam, the more that I studied it, the more it took me away from a very narrow way of looking at life, and it opened up my perception of a reality that I couldn't have come up with by my own intellect. And eventually, I accepted Islam in Florida. I took a trip with about 300 Muslims, and I was the only person who wasn't Muslim. There was a convention down there, and there was about 4 buses full of people coming from here. And I was the only non-Muslim. And there, I met a person who was from my country, from Colombia, and he was Muslim. And we sat down and we talked and we talked.
But let me ask you, did you talk in Spanish?
No, actually we spoke in English. He had grown up here. Yes, he had grown up here. So this person who was Colombian, who I started speaking to, started talking about how he became Muslim. And also, I began to mention to him that what I knew of Islam seemed like a practical solution to all the problems in Colombia. After living in Colombia and loving Colombia, he was from Colombia as well. And so we realized that Islam was a solution not only for Colombia, but for every human being. And then he turned to me and he said, why aren't you